find, I don't know, that's a wonderful. Yep. Okay, so. Yep. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Yep. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Just regards to the occasion.
Pardon?
There's no disrespect.
Yeah.
The idea is to then set the stage, speaking to the mob, to the king. And stand here, because that's the mob.
Stand here?
Yep. Okay.
Where's Tamika?
She was doing a video call.
What's the time? Do you want to? Are you happy to go?
If it's Tamika, 3 p.m.
It's currently past 3 p.m.
Okay.
3:01 now.
What's showing at the moment if someone's logged in? Is there a screen or something?
It's a screen that says thanks for joining.
Okay, they can wait.
Yeah.
That's good. I've never been to webinar start on time. 8:40. I can drop you home. I got my car at the airport. Yeah. Oh yeah, I've got that. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
Audience members, there's no audience. Is that correct? We're not presenting to an audience?
We're just feedback. Are we taking questions from audience or?
Yeah.
Yep.
Chuck
Cool.
it out.
Okay.
And online too, because we've got to keep online.
So who's watching online?
Where have we got anything? You got online for the questions and that? Yeah.
You're just going to have to come to Mike to ask the question, eh?
Someone else?
What's that, sorry? If there's questions? Yeah, I'm just thinking, unless...
Well, I'll just write it down on this paper and send it to you and just sit in front of you.
Okay, sure, that'll be... Yeah, okay, cool, then we can just... Yeah. Well, see how this goes, because the 90 minutes is going to go really quick. So we'll see if we got how the time goes, hey?
Here we go, ready?
3 minutes.
Oh, we're live now already, they're saying. We're on.
Do you want to begin it or?
They've got audio.
Our phones are silent or off, actually.
Good to go?
No, hold. Once Stephen says going live, he'll do a countdown and then it's
live right now.
1, 2, 3.
It's live right now.
It's live.
Yeah, people can hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stephen. Just hold pause. Let's put silence on stage. We're going to go live. Stephen? In 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. First and foremost, I'd like to pay my acknowledgement to the Gadigal people whose land we meet on today. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also extend that respect to the families of victims that we've lost to deaths in custody. Thank you for joining us at this panel, and this is in regards to the 30 years since the Royal Commission, still no justice. This panel is brought to you by Gamilaraay Next Generation, FISTT, and War Brisbane, which is the Warriors Against Resistance. I'd like to introduce our panel, which will be facilitated today by Dr Chelsea Watego, which is to my right. We have Martin Hodgson, who is a human rights activist, joining us online virtually. We have Susan Dixon from South Australia. We have Aunt Shirley, Lomas from Redfern, originally from Moree, Gomeroi woman. We've got Jungaji Brady also joining us. We've got brother Jason Fong joining us as well, Aunt Jenny Munro, and Makayla Reynolds. So I'd like to hand it over to Dr Chelsea Watego so we can begin the panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. I'd like to acknowledge, as I visited this place as a Mununjali woman, it is a privilege to be invited into this conversation with Mob today. I just want to acknowledge the presence in this room, the fierceness of all the blackfellas that are sitting here, both that are online, that are here. People don't, I think, realise where that fierceness comes from, that it comes from a place of pain, and a pain that everyone had to revisit again today. But underneath all of that is love, like love for blackfellas, and that's why everyone's here today, is because we believe blackfellas deserve better than what's been offered, and families deserve much better than what's been offered. So I just want to be conscious that this conversation we're having today is coming from a place of love. I really just want to thank the panellists for your generosity of love and spirit in the fight that extends beyond today and beyond 30 years ago. So we're very grateful to that. You're sharing your time, because I know that a lot of people are already tired right now from today, and particularly what happened here in New South Wales in Parliament this morning with recommendations that haven't actually done anything about racial violence. So I just want to acknowledge the labour that's being exhausted here as well. The purpose of today is to look back, to remind people where this has come from, because some people don't know about what happened 30 years ago and beyond. It's to look at this process of commissions and inquiries and what it does to blackfellas, but also then to look forward, because one thing I've heard at all of the rallies across the country has been the frustration at marching with grandparents and now marching with grandchildren. So I hope that we get to today is a conversation with what needs to happen and how we move forward, so that we're not sitting here in another 30 years' time having the same kind of conversation. I was wondering if it's possible if we could start and open up the yarn today with Aunty Jenny to take us back to 30 years ago, before when the Royal Commission was called, what the movement was like then, what blackfellas were asking for.
Hello, firstly, and thanks for asking me to attend. 30 years ago, remember we had the bicentenary in '88, so in New South Wales in particular, there was a great, I think we called it at the time a renaissance of our peoples, politically, socially, culturally. The politics really had been stepping up since the embassy was established in '72 in Canberra. There were several political issues that took certainly national significance over those years. The build-up to '88, the land rights legislations in the Territory in '76, the racial discrimination in '76, '83, the New South Wales land rights legislation. There were a lot of issues, but I think the difference now is that we had numbers. There were Aboriginal supporters in their thousands that turned up to demonstrations. You see the numbers in Melbourne now, which I think is the pinnacle. 30 years ago we were getting those numbers in Sydney and more. Remember we had the bicentenary the year before. 88 and 90, I had 2 children in those years, so I was particularly busy. I was also the CEO of the, once they'd established the Royal Commission, of the NAILS body, the National Aboriginal Islander Legal Services Secretariat. We had field officers that covered the whole of the country. We did a national interviews with every Aboriginal prisoner in the colony at the time. These were very important, I think, research papers and particular angles that we took that were eventually included in some of the Royal Commission recommendations, like the self-determination and the sovereignty recommendations, which basically haven't seen the light of day since the report was written back then in '92, '93. So the players, I think, are really what we need to turn our attention to. The players that were around in '91 that are still here giving the government advice today. which is not much difference from what that was back then. It was basically a deflection away from the real issues. Those people have been well paid for by the government in the 30 years since then. They're still on the government tit, and they get a lot of money to betray our people on an annual basis. So remember those people that were around then and played a part in the Royal Commission, the Ricky Dick recommendations, they're still here today. They still advise government. It doesn't matter whether the government's Labor or Liberal, those advisors, black advisors to the government, stay the same and have stayed the same for that 30-year period. So we've seen a political directive from both, a bipartisan directive from both parties that says that these issues would not be addressed from 88 onwards, from the Royal Commission recommendations when they were finally handed down. That's why they spent, remember, the $10 million over 10 years for the swanky walk across the bridge in 2001. Not much other money was spent. There used to be, I mean, they destroyed forests really in the early years with the reports and the replies and the comebacks with the information, but they never, ever, ever did anything that was substantial for Aboriginal people in changing the embedded nature of the racism and how it assaults us in jails and on the streets every day of our lives.
Today in Parliament, David Shoebridge talked about the recommendations that they've offered that some 30 years on, which includes the first recommendation is to implement the existing recommendations yet again. But he had this whole story about hope and goodwill. And I'm curious about what was the sentiment 30 years ago when the recommendations were handed down from mob? Was there a sense of this idea of hope and goodwill, or what was...
From a particular section of the Aboriginal community that get paid to feel good.
Hey.
You know, we had reconciliation was what we called it, and remember the person that was named the father of reconciliation, that was a black actor too, remember? So these things are deliberately planned and conspired by government 10, 20, 30 years in advance of when they actually happen on the ground. The fact that we had the numbers in Sydney in the 88 and early 90s meant that they couldn't ram that conservative black agenda down our throats, so they came at it from the back with the players that are still there today.
The other thing that was talked about today as some sort of milestone of success was this kind of middle ground politics, that the recommendations were something that everyone would agree to. And I just wonder about the current political environment in terms of black politics and where you see things sitting in terms of if things become more conservative in black communities, and how do we change that in terms of mobilising blackfellas again?
Well, I don't know, other than the fact that our radical compatriots seem to live hard and die young. Seems to be the problem with our people. The Conservatives live well and live to be old. So they're still around. They still manipulate the government. They're still paid by government for that manipulation. So, you know, there were outrages when we had some of those deaths in custody. They were certainly, you know, they're crimes against humanity. They've been happening in this country for 250 years, and this government won't and can't deal with it because it has to deal with itself.
Susan, I know you're familiar with the commission process, having to go through it yourself, your family to go through it. Do you want to talk to us about your experience of the Royal Commission and how, when those recommendations were passed down, how you experienced that as a family member?
Part of that was when the Royal Commission was announced and it convened in Adelaide with my brother's death. It was very invasive. So things like we were interviewed as families, all siblings and family members' records were taken, school records, whether we had any interaction with child protection, the criminal justice system. Very, very invasive collection of data. It was, it was very stressful on the family, very disappointing. To actually look 30 years on and then go to Parliament today and hear that someone's died in exactly the same way that my brother died, being, you know, not suspended, you know, being found in any cell laying on a bed, you know, So it was very hard. The impact on our family was the ongoing trauma. My mum was very active in those spaces, calling for a Royal Commission. She felt sadly let down. It had a lot of impact on our immediate family and trauma where we had, where we lost family members through it. So it was really hard, and it every time someone dies in custody, it re-traumatises you. So you actually live through that again, and like today in Sydney, it was like very emotional to hear the Chatfield family talk. For me, it was very very you're reliving it, and like Aunty Jen said. It was the grassroots movement, that was the movement that kind of get, that they're the ones doing the work, doing it for nothing. Like, they do the hard work, and they're often left out of the conversations, and that's happening today. And we see that, as a Kaurna and Narungga woman, I see that happening in my state. Sadly, as women, we don't have voices. It's very patriarchal, and I have never I didn't publicly speak until, because I was too traumatised, until the Black Lives Matter rallies in Adelaide. That was the first time that I actually felt that, that I had could speak. But I'm like Aunty Jen. I went and did a law degree because not to practice law, but to actually skill myself up. So I did a law degree and Adelaide University, and it was really hard. Found it being in an institution, it was and like I said, it's not to practice law, but to actually to actually look at policies and procedures and use that in situations to actually be active in spaces for my people.
I mean, having to do a law degree to understand how to survive the violence of this place, that's the lengths to which black fellas have to go to navigate this space, to try and make sense of the violence in order to be able to outwork it in a system that doesn't offer any justice. Yeah, and some of the judiciary had said to me when I did my law degree, we didn't realise that you were Alice's daughter, that Kingsley was your brother. Some of the judiciary actually, so some of them did say that to me, and we had a law event, and they didn't realise that, and it's like, because you're kind of just you're moving in silence, doing the work that you need to do for your community. And I totally get where Aunty Jen's coming from, because we're the people who don't have a voice, but we're the ones down on the ground, doing the work. You were talking earlier today, about how you received the recommendations from the Royal Commission. Can you share with us, as a family member who was almost put on trial in that process, how did the recommendations come down for you, and how did you experience that process? Well, we felt scrutinised as a family. Like we were on trial, and because it was very methodical, going through, looking at our family background, and criminologists writing stuff on my brother who was deceased, and I found that really confronting. All these reports were getting written, and so what happened is, it was the governor received it first of South Australia, and then it was couriered to us, and we had media outside our house because the first 4 were all released on the same day, and it was very confronting with media. Very disappointing to hear that where there was a failure of a duty of care, but there wouldn't be any no recommendations made for any charges. The only outcome that did come out of my brother's death was it went to the DPP and in South Australia, and they fined correctional services $45 for falsifying records on the day of his death. So
he was taken to a different part of the jail before he died, and they wanted to cover that up, and so the Royal Commission went in and found that. The coroner's investigation didn't, but the Royal Commission went in. They it was actually Paul Coe who was very methodical. He was very going in and finding those things, and he found out that that he was taken to a different area just prior to his death, and then and it was covered up, and so that was given to DPP, and they received a $45 fine.
$45.
Yeah.
Aunty Shirley, if I can invite you to talk about your experience at that time of the Royal Commission and your involvement.
Sorry. Well, the first time I've sort of ever been involved was when I heard about the John Pat death in Western Australia, and then when I went to work at the Aboriginal Legal Service. Prior to that, I sort of worked for the Crown on the opposite side, and I never really knew about injustice. I've been part of the stolen generation in the dormitory in Cherbourg, and it opened my eyes, and I typed up the final report for David Gundy to the Commission, and I guess thinking in doing that you'd find that there was hope that this would not happen again, but there's been no changes whatsoever. And I worry now about our young ones, men and women, that are in the incarcerated. What will happen to them? Are they going to be future deaths in custody? And then I look at how the New South Wales blacks, who are at the forefront of all the changes, political changes in this country, we've sort of gone quiet. And you see the people in all the other states leading the way. And I think blackfellas become too complacent. And, we just give up, and we shouldn't give up. I guess as the founder of the first disability service in Australia for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, my main concern is for people who have disabilities in the justice system, because there are a high percentage of our people that have got a mental health issue or an intellectual disability. And there have been a few reports put out by UNSW. I haven't had the privilege of reading them yet, but I do know that First Peoples Disability Network, who got its origins out of our group, they've not done any research into that at all. And but it needs to be done, because you find with, particularly in mental health, it's that intergenerational trauma for all our people, because when you think about, there isn't one black family that hasn't been affected by it. And I think the only way for change with our people is that we need to have our own political parties. You can't trust the Labor or the Liberal Party, and even the Greens for that matter. And we need to take that seat at the table, because we as Aboriginal people, we've been given the privilege of looking after this country since the beginning of time. And it's our responsibility. It's a privilege. I consider it a privilege, but with that privilege comes responsibility and rights, and it's our responsibility to ensure that the rights of all people are met in this country, not just Aboriginal people, all people, because we've been given that custodianship since the beginning of time. And but I am concerned now about more of the mental health issue in our prisoners that are in custody. And I've got family that are in jails and that. And, and when you were talking about how you were grilled, through the Royal Commission, it's the same with, I find docs are still taking our children away, still going over, and we've had 5 generations in my own family taken from my grandmother to her great-grandchildren. So when does it stop? It's a never-ending story. And, we didn't invade anyone's land, we didn't kill anyone, we didn't steal anyone's children. Our only disability, as far as I can see, was the colour of our skin. We're black. That was our disability. Yeah, so, but yeah, that's sort of my little bit in it. Yeah.
Thank you. And I welcome panellists to jump in and join this yarn. I think one of the things the Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody did shine a light on is to the health needs of Indigenous peoples in custody and outside of custody, and we saw this push towards investing in Indigenous health. But some 30 years on, we're seeing natural causes being used as an alibi for state neglect, and the way in which ill health is being used to kind of disguise the failing of duty of care to our mob inside. And I was wondering if I could invite Makayla to tell us about Nathan, his story first, and his story beyond the story the coroner told, and your experience of their account.
So Nathan died in 2018 due to an asthma attack at John Moroney Correctional Centre. It took about 40 minutes for Nathan to receive any type of help from people that were meant to help him. The guards and the nurse were late to respond. Nathan was treated for a drug overdose, although it was an asthma attack. Even if someone is suffering an overdose, though, like, they should be treated adequately. So we have just finished his inquest a few weeks ago, and my sister was actually the point, so she took the fort for our whole family because her father and my mother couldn't do it. She felt as if she couldn't tell us everything that was going on in the inquest. She didn't want to hurt our feelings, so a lot of stuff she didn't relay on to us when she received the brief of it, and she read it, but she didn't share it with the family. Now she feels as if that she's let us down, although she hasn't, because she didn't want to hurt us, but then we were shocked in the inquest hearing and seeing things that we didn't think we were going to hear or see. During the inquest process over the 8 days, I found that we were quite alone. The guards had support of each other. They were there every day. At one stage, they actually requested that they should have a private entry into the court so they can avoid the family at all cost. That didn't get approved. So we did have to face them every day. We also felt alone. We didn't have much support except from our family and friends and organisations and other people who do advocate. We didn't know what was going to happen day to day. We just went to court every day and were told on that day. The recommendations that were put forward, we received them. We just waited for the upload the recommendations to be uploaded online, and then we went our own way to print them out. They didn't have anything printed out for us. The solicitors and barristers had one copy, and they were willing to copy it for us and give it to us. So we're waiting basically for something to be uploaded online. When the coroner gave her thoughts and outcome, it was very quick. Took like 1 minute or 2 minutes, and then she said we can go off and read the rest at our own recall. There was quite a few family members, maybe 11 or 12 of us there, and we didn't know if that was the end or if that's it. After sitting there for 8 days, going through everything, and then to be told the outcome within 1 minute and be told to go read the rest by ourselves was quite we were shocked by that. During his inquest, it was a very big blame game. Justice Health could kind of blame correctives, and correctives could blame Justice Health throughout the whole thing. They were kind of blaming each other. We thought that the doctor who failed Nathan should be put up to the board. The coroner thought that he shouldn't be put up to the board because then it would only be him, and it's not fair basically for Justice Health and Corrective Services, as they all played a part. So because they all played a part, they thought that the doctor shouldn't be put up for failing Nathan. All these people still hold their jobs to this day. The nurse is still a nurse. She left Corrective Services 2 weeks after Nathan's death. Was
there any recommendation for referrals to the regulatory bodies of the health professionals who failed him? Do we know?
There was, but I can't remember on the top of my head exactly what they are. It was just to look further into the JAS system and also the asthma protocols they have to follow. What else?
Can I ask about your experience of having to read the account? Uncle Colin Chatfield this morning was talking about reading the coronial inquiry and how, you know, our loved ones get depicted as monsters when the real monsters are the people in these institutions. And we've heard it a few times, the way in which the state tells a story about the black victim as somehow being complicit in their own death to absolve the state from its responsibility. Did you get to tell Nathan's story in this process? Did you get to tell who he was as a full person, as the joker, as the jester that you know him as?
We were given that opportunity on the final day of the inquest, where we could play a slideshow of Nathan and try and explain what kind of person Nathan was. We had the counsellor come up to us and say that, oh, that reminds me of me growing up myself. But then at the end of the day, that was it. Like, he didn't think that anything should be put forward or nothing like that. They just have a little bit of remorse, just enough, you know, to tolerate them, I think.
What do you do the day after that all happens, when it's the court's shut, the report's printed? What do you do as a family?
We just have to go back to work and, you know, try to take this on our back keep carrying it. We don't have a choice to, you know, have a holiday or, you know, a break. We have to go and we've got bills to pay. We have jobs we need to attend. The government doesn't support us in any way to be able to take time off and be with family members.
Thank you for sharing your story. I wonder, Jason, if I could turn to you, because in the course of this conversation we hear the stories of our mob inside who are no longer here to tell of their experiences inside and their journey. And I wonder if you could share with us your journey.
These days when you go to prison, you can put a referral form in to see welfare, and you might get seen for like 2 months sometimes. If you get seen a couple of weeks later, you're doing well. There can't be rehabilitation without incentives. There's no incentives for anybody to go good there. And if someone just swore at the nurse one day and you see the nurse the next day, you're going to cop the brunt of that.
Yep.
You know? There's just no support before they get out or when they get out. No support whatsoever. They get out with a $150 check, and is it any wonder that they go and steal to eat a week later? Yeah, we need the support inside before they get out, and then as they get out, have that support there waiting for them. Yeah.
Can you tell us
business.
about your story in terms of your healing and what?
Because I don't have rehabilitation without incentive, I had to create my own. I started putting my thoughts down on paper to be able to move forward. And I turned that into the passion I have now, which is writing poetry and spoken word. Yeah. But they're building like new jails every second day. They call them pop-up jails. It's a big business. And that's all there is to it. It's a money-making scam. The officers only worried about getting their overtime in. There's no consideration whatsoever. If the Aboriginal delegate can't relate to you, if he's from Kempsey when you're from the South Coast, it's hard to relate to someone, different tribe. Yeah. Yes, I write for Beyond the Bars Art, and yeah, we're going okay. We're from a grassroots level. Yeah.
Would you be prepared to share something with us?
Yeah. Well, this one I wrote when I come off drugs and I was in a cell with nothing. I said, all mistakes made, yet still I couldn't see. How many more takes for my will to set me free? For my mind to clearly see. The decision's all me, as I shall be, a man on a mission, with a plan that's grand as we face with precision. As we face with precaution, the taste of the warning's embedded in my mouth. I had to move forward before I got out. Before I went mad, never got out. Before I was that sad, I was glad, time's not about. I got to shout to release that negative force, but somehow it increases even worse. Time to disperse, foremost and first. All them thoughts that never benefit. I'm sick of dwelling on irrelevant shit for the hell of it. Never excelling, just rebelling from what we spent. Talk is cheap, we won't forget. What's real to reap ain't over yet. Now for the street, I must share my best, because these rhymes I speak, they do tear my chest. Yeah, so I can move forward by putting them down. Thanks.
Thank you. Jungaji, you've has spent time working with mob inside, the young fellas, but also had to watch the footage of a loved one inside, past Aunty Sherry more recently. Can you share with us, I guess, where you're at today? You've been asked to tell a lot of stories today and represent the family. Where are you at today and hearing these stories?
Thanks, Sister Chelsea. Just in terms of putting in place protocol, my respects to the Aboriginal custodians of this beautiful country where we are sharing in this ceremony. I'd say it like that, in the ceremony. To my elders, my uncles and aunties who are no longer present also, my respects, and the brothers and sisters. I'm a Guguyalanji Birigava man. I've got country up north, North Queensland, historical ties to Cherbourg, Warrabin, Palm Island, Yarrabah, and the Brisbane black community also, a community of Anala, severe ties, strong ties to. Our loved ones are alive, in the words that we speak. When we see speaking of our loved ones, they cease to exist. So I feel it's incumbent on us as the humanised remnants of our loved ones that we have lost to a nefarious system that continues to oppress, to marginalise, to disenfranchise, to disassociate us from our true calling. What is our true calling? What is our identity? And that's something that successively has been passed down in terms of intergenerational traumas. My Aunty Sherry, who's a proud Birigaba, urbanised, strong black cultural woman, had to deal with those I suppose intersectionalities. Being a woman, but being a black woman was just as tough. Coming from my nan's time, from my great nan, Nana Kitty Williams from Cherbourg, Idesville area, but just all the just beautiful old women that, it'd be remiss of me to just pay my respects to them for where we are now, because having to carry those traumas, those emotional traumas from womb to tomb, and so on, since the illegal establishment of the colony back in the bygone days. And we get to it, to where we are right now and having these conversations about how we're going to better these circumstances for the children and the children that are yet to be born. What measures are we going to put in place with the government system that are, the same old political adages as in terms of, wait there, you blacks, we'll get to you. Just wait there. We know that you're there. And to be brutally honest, we're sick of it. We're sick of it as a nation, as a black nation. We make up many peoples, saltwater peoples, freshwater peoples, skin, language groups. We're proud, but we also hurt and we cry. 5 deaths this last month, as it says on the shirt, is inexplicable. 470 to 500 deaths since 1991 is a modern genocide. Not to mention the tens of thousands that we've lost tragically under inhumane circumstances since them tall ships arrived on these shores just there. Aunty Sherry, unfortunately, she was neglected by QPS. She shouldn't have been in the watch house. Yeah, she was brought in. She had warrants. Okay. But her basic human rights was neglected. She should have been in a hospital, under guard, but she shouldn't have been there. And the way that she went out, I mean, I can only empathise and just feel, because she's stoic too. She's strong. She's stubborn. But yeah, from what we've heard in terms of the QP6, sixes, and we're in the infancy stages of the coronial inquest, so we're still learning about exactly the undertakings and the causative factors leading up to her death are coming about. So, yeah, these are hard times, and as I said, my heart cries for our peoples, for our old people that fought so hard, Grandfather Don Brady, all the beautiful old vanguards, we venerate and we honour. I take my murumbo. But yeah, today we're still having these same conversations. What's it going to be down the track with the normalisation of extremism, fascism, racism, bigotry, and these conversations, but also people's perceptions about blackfellas. Mob working on the front line who deal with First Nations people. They have a duty of care to ensure that the safety of that person is upheld, So, yeah, I am cumbersome and I am tired and fatigued because, we talk, But when I think about my kids and my grandkids, I look down, to the promised land. But I understand, as I said up in Brisbane, we've still got to walk through that valley. And the valley is malevolent. It's gratuitous. It's scary. People pulling at you, they got the darkness and stuff, but we have to overcome. And I was taught the longer that you stare in the eyes of the bigoted beast, the stronger you will be. So, yeah, go sister.
Thank you. It was, I think it was reported somewhere today that the Prime Minister shed some tears for some soldiers, yet I'm not sure if he's actually agreed to meet with the families who've been petitioning to sit with him, and not for revenge, but for solutions so that it doesn't happen to anyone else again. I'm just wondering, in terms of the various legal, political, intellectual responses here, and this is open to the panel, what will it take for this country to care, to care enough to hold someone accountable for the deaths of our loved ones? Because I'm not sure how you can have change without some kind of accountability to those who have gone. What are people's thoughts in terms of what will it take to get this place to care? And is it a legal one? Is it a political one? What is the strategy here? Just an easy question for you. But I also welcome, I know we've got a small enough
We need our own legal team. We need barristers. We need proper barristers. We've got to stop mucking around with these rookie ones that they're sending out from the universities. We need proper legal barristers and lawyers to help fight our case for human rights. This is bigger than what it is. And that's what people got to understand. It's not just about recommendations of what they're doing, but implementing and making sure that. But what we really need is independent barristers and human rights lawyers to work with us, not these rookies that they're pushing through the ALS. I'm sick of educating them.
There is no way is this country going to do justice for the tragedy and the fact of what's happened to Aboriginal people for deaths in custody. It is will never come from this country. I mean, there's recommendations of recommendations from recommendations and recommendations. That's all that ever comes out of it is recommendations. And I've sat here and I've listened to people talk about the hand-picked, I'm not going to swear, but the hand-picked representatives that are employed by government that are a part of the Great Oppression. They're the ones that continually... I mean, in all honesty, if people were sincere, they would have, to be blunt, got off their asses and done something about it. But I hear the words of my brother, Paul Coe, say, the white man is very clever. He has now he has used Aboriginal people to bring down Aboriginal people, So after 250 odd years of oppression, they've certainly used and abused us. But the only way that we're going to get justices or actually take it to another level is to take it to United Nations, to shame this country for what it is. You've got a parliament that's made up of different, you know, the Liberal, the Labor, the Greens, Independents. In all honesty, why? 30 years down. I mean, this inquiry into Aboriginal deaths in custody, it was beyond. It started 20 years before that, you know. So we're talking about not 30 years, but 50 years of major oppression and murder of Aboriginal people that have died in custody. And it's not just men, it's women and it's kids, you know. So, yeah, it's wonderful. There's been a report that's been handed down and there's recommendations. Do I have hope? No. I mean, I heard Shirley talk about, you know, the apathy that's there in the community. You see, here in New South Wales, sadly there are so many fractured factions, it's not funny, because people's egos certainly got in the way of where we should all be. But the fire in the belly went out, you know. And I've got to say that I'm just this side of 70 and I am tired. And I just wish and pray that young ones are going to step up, stand tall, stand proud and grab it by the throat and, to put it bluntly, shake the shit out of it, so at least it's going to go to another level where we are not going to live in fear of our grandchildren and great-grandchildren falling victim to becoming a death in custody.
Thank you.
The cherry picking of the recommendations was a real coup for the government at the time. Remember, we started with the last recommendation and not the first. I mean, if you're going to do anything in a systemic way, you start at the beginning and work your way through all of it. But as most things that happen to us in this country, it was done arse up for particular reasons, you know, and that was to cloud the agenda, cloud the issues, what the important ones are. I mean, the fact that we still live by two laws in this country and the white system will not recognise black law. I mean, these are the things that were taken to the world, you know, 30 years ago when Paul and them first went to Geneva. And they were basically ignored by the world back then too. So, I mean, what we've got to understand is the world don't really care that much either. And if we're going to find a solution, we have to find it ourselves. And the solution is there all the time for us to understand. It comes back to our law, our system. And all the wider community have to do is recognise that there are two laws in this country and we operate under a different system of law and governance that we do. And we still continue, even though they force us every day to try and ignore the fact that we have a dual system. They still have this psychosis about they're the only important people in the world. And that's the basis of it all, this racism, this inherent superiority of one group over another.
Well, the silencing of racism today and the release of the report of the review, I think, was most glaring. So on the one hand, at the media conference was a discussion about this review coming off the back of a global Black Lives Matter movement, which was about police violence. Yet we find not one recommendation here in the recommendations released today that mentions race or racism explicitly, police violence. Instead, you've got recommendations and data collection and questions like how are Indigenous women becoming the most incarcerated population?
Very well cherry-picked recommendations by the sound of them. I mean, there were in the guts of the Royal Commission recommendations, those 339, there were some really good recommendations about recognition of our self-determination, recognition of our inherent right to that law that we can still continue to practice, though, even though white Australia will not recognise it. I mean, that throws into question their whole history about this settled continent, this peaceful process that supposedly happened, that was more bloody than any war in any part of the world at any time.
And I just know as our contingent walked into Parliament House today with our T-shirts on, I was advised to cover mine because a Black Lives Matter shirt on this day was seen as a protest and a political statement.
Well,
now
there there goes freedom of speech, doesn't it?
And Tamika pointed out it's only controversial if you believe that Black lives don't matter. And this is on the day that blackfellas are invited into the House to hear the recommendations and then quickly shipped out onto the stairs to speak to the media.
You need to cover up there, isn't it?
It's all for photo opportunities. It's not about any political solution. I mean, it's sorry, but in every 4-year cycle, it's about keeping particular politicians in or keeping other particular politicians out. And I'm sorry, but that's what we get captured by every 4 years in this cycle. I'm sorry, but there are a lot of bad white politicians, and the majority of them I'd put in jail and chuck away the key. I mean, if you want to use the prison system for good, let's actually start using it for good. Put those people that lie to the country on an average daily basis in jail.
Accountability. We have a question online from Martin. Do you want a statement from Martin? Thank you.
Yeah, so we have a statement from Martin Hodgson from online, and it reads, Wallawana brothers and sisters, we are at war, one being waged upon us. More Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have died at the hands of police and corrective services in the last 30 years than have Australian soldiers in all the wars Australia has fought in that time, including the wars in Iraq twice, Afghanistan, Timor and other foreign missions. It is my privilege to serve mob and something I've done my entire adult life, having never charged a single client and earned $1 off the back of their suffering. Too many organisations that are supposed to serve the community fail miserably in doing so. Failure after failure is not acceptable, and given this state of war, these organisations and those who earn good monies working within these organisations must improve immediately or be relieved of their duty. The issue of coronial inquest is vitally important. Our own forensic experts must be allowed to attend the first autopsy. Follow-up forensic work, while vital, is largely hamstrung by that initial determination of the cause of death. We must be allowed as lawyers to act within the inquest process to have the powers to investigate independently. Police, corrective services and justice health. I also intend on launching wrongful death actions under the Compensation to Relatives Act of 1897 New South Wales and punish police and corrective services financially to the tune of millions. They may not respect our lives, but they respect their own bank balance. I have commenced such action already in Queensland. Finally, we must be proactive. We must do everything we can to prevent deaths happening in the first place. We must empty the jails and tell police via legislation to keep their fucking hands to themselves. They are a poison to our communities and to many programs being offered up by the governments as a solution involves the police being given more access to the community. The age of criminal responsibility should be 18. How can we say you can go to jail but you can't yet vote? Denied your civil rights but robbed of your liberty. This is unacceptable. All Aboriginal women must be released from custody today. I say all and I mean all, as well as all Aboriginal men convicted of non-violent crimes. Those convicted of violent crimes must have their case immediately reviewed by an independent panel of Aboriginal experts, not parole boards who deny release as a matter of course. Finally, I am the only living human being to win cases and free prisoners on every continent on the globe. I don't know much, I am ignorant of most, but this is my area and this is what I do. We can no longer tolerate talking heads, journalists and other know-it-alls from taking up this space. We have to fight with our best on the front line, those willing to sacrifice it all for our community. I devote myself to continue this work.
We stand with you, my brother. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Martin.
I just want to say, I don't know, I've got hope that with Aboriginal people, and there's, because I'm at the Aboriginal Tent Embassy, and understanding that there's people, non-Indigenous people that are tired of the way that Aboriginal people are being treated. And my thing is, if we got to make a stand, why don't we make a stand while
we've got the government in there and asking them to step down and putting appropriate people in there that have all our well-being and at best interest. Not Scott Morrison. He's obviously not worried about us. He's not worried about anybody but himself. So, you know, this is my thing, is where we ask people that, you know, someone who specialises in health to be in a health minister, someone who specialises in law to do with law, not with these people that are just, you know, they're just nominated and they're just, you know, voted. That's not the right way this should be done. I understand, Aunty Anne, I do understand that you think that this might not happen, but if we band together with people from all over the country and other countries, who's to know what could happen? I'm just saying, you know, with hope, that this could happen, because their own people come to the embassy and they continually say they're tired. You know, they're just realising because of this COVID that they're tired of being controlled.
Can I just say, Down, I ask you, we have Aboriginal people that are elected to Parliament at a federal. We've got none in state. There's no one here in New South Wales that says they're Aboriginal, yeah? But we have how many people that are elected to federal Parliament? We've got one woman that certainly stands on her own, and that's that young Thorpe girl from Victoria, right? She's true to not only the cause, but certainly what her family, her upbringing. The politics of the party that she is a member of, no doubt, are a little bit more liberating than the others. But just let's look at what we've got there at the national level, because we've got nothing here in New South Wales. We have 3, yeah, elected by Labor. 2 senators, and then the other one. The other one, yeah? And that, we're talking about the birth of reconciliation, right? But I ask you, Diane, and you're down there, my niece, at the 10 Embassy, how many of them fellas have been over to the Aboriginal 10 Embassy?
Not one.
So say no more. If you think... Yeah, she's the only one.
That's not new. That's been happening for...
Hang on. We're talking about 221. We're talking about 220, 2021, 2020, 2000. So, then how... we're not going to get anything out of, you know, anybody in Canberra. If they can't get off their backsides, come across the wherever. Mind you, they wouldn't have to walk because they've got plenty of cars down there that can drive them there. Have they ever come and sat down and talked to people there at the 10 Embassy? I mean, bearing in mind that not one of them would be there if it wasn't for the Aboriginal 10 Embassy. I don't recall any of them ever being there getting their backsides kicked and walking on when we all got, you know, copped what we copped there in the early 70s. You know, like, the only way, and I mean Shirley actually hit on it, is that we need to mobilise and establish our own political party. And there are enough non-Aboriginal people that will walk with us on that journey. So yeah, that actually supports what you are saying. But that's the only way, because sadly, I don't know, as I said, I'm tired of it, and it makes me want to cry. Here we are sitting here today talking about more deaths, and I've got to say it just gets more depressing.
Thank you. You've got a question? Yep.
Yeah, we have a question from Dash online, and the question is, do you think stopping deaths in custody looks like getting rid of the jails and prisons and replacing them with mental health and other community-based methods of justice over punishment?
Jazz, you're looking for a revolution, girl.
certainly was being called for in Meanjin. Sister Ruby talked about, you know, where, justice is not about putting them in the same system that's killing us. And so, you know, how do we imagine a system that's not violent? Well, we have one?
Well, we did. I mean, that's what I mean about our law. It's those people amongst ourselves that speak with the forked tongue, that say one thing and mean another. I mean, like I said, the father of reconciliation, he's been on the tit for 30-odd years and he's been well paid. Now, there's some very, very dubious stories about that man before he became a pet of the government. And the same with the brother. I mean, like I said, they've all been paid very well over the years to sell their own people out. And that's how they do it. They set the divide up all the time. Who's our leaders? They're not my leaders. They never have been. But somebody, somewhere, must say they're a leader because the government keeps on propping them up as leaders. They don't walk the walk of black leaders, and they certainly don't talk the talk of black leaders. They talk the talk of government compromise, and that translates to sellout, betrayal.
Can I ask the Labor government, Anthony Albanese put forth a bit of an agenda today, and he talked about justice reinvestment. Do people see justice reinvestment as also a sellout and betrayal in terms of what blackfellas are asking for?
Still hasn't been invested. Why are we reinvesting in something that was never invested in the first place? I mean, we have the most institutionally racist system in the world that operates every day in this country. Not an eyelid is battered. Yeah. Not an eyelid. Every time there's a death in custody now, it's so normalised we don't even see it in media reports anymore. It is so normalised by the system.
What was interesting today in the story that was told in Parliament was there was a story told about this belief that there was hope and goodwill amongst all the political parties, that these recommendations would somehow could be implemented because of the hope and goodwill amongst the political parties, which was juxtaposed with the story they referred to, the grief and rage of black families who were sitting quietly in the dark listening to the story being told. And so it's interesting, even in the stories they tell, the way in which black victims are somehow framed as the aggressors in a system that's always and only ever been violent to blackfellas. Like, it's this...
Well, you've never had police charged with Aboriginal deaths in custody. The system is not designed to actually bring accountability to them. It's always putting the spotlight on us and how... You know, those pesky natives keep jumping up and down about sovereign rights, you know.
I'm just conscious of time, and what I wanted to... Anisha?
Yeah, I just want to ask a question. Isn't this Albanese the person that in the next federal election is going to give the Queensland preferences to Pauline Hanson's One Nation party, to a racist red-headed ratbag? So... what hope is there for us?
I mean, you know, Pauline was a pariah 20 years ago. She's normalised in the parliament now, you know. I mean, that's how they do their thing.
Yeah. We do have some of the journalists here, and we've got David Shoebridge, and we've got George Newhouse here, National Justice, Talia. You guys, any questions or?
I think we're here to listen.
Yeah.
Okay, and particularly solidarity in the struggle to last one.
I think, you know, like, you know, this being a room, you know, we had a 50 capacity, and, you know, I would have really opened it up to everyone. And I suppose, you know, having you guys here today is also about, you know, giving you a grassroots perspective of, you know, where I come from as a lot of this, as you can see, the anger, the anguish here, the hurt here, and the emotion, because I'm tired, these old girls are tired, we picked up that fight. What we would like from the National Justice Project, ATSLs, the legal service, stand with us, don't fight against us. Mm-hmm. Same as the Greens, we're setting up our political party, open the door for us. Our group is called FISTT, Fighting in Solidarity Towards Treaties. It was a name made up by George Coe, we won't go there, but anyway. We are family groups, we are family clans. That fire came out of the embassy in 2012, and we've brought that back, and this is where it's coming to, and we've done this, and FISTT has been, and Warriors of Aboriginal Resistance, and the Brisbane Blacks, have been instrumental in making these rallies happen. It never happened from just because the Americanised way. You got to understand that black deaths in this country has been happening since colonisation. We're wanting to work with any mob, But you've got to come to our table on our terms. So we're asking the National Justice Project Legal Service to come with FISTT and help us set up our national body, our state body in New South Wales, and then we call a national one from it, bring all the states and territories together.
You've got right across the road, our Parliament House, at the Port Aboriginal 10 Embassy. You know?
It's always
it's always been there since 1972. Why don't we act together, band together? This is what I'm saying. I keep saying that and start. You know, it's not just like in Canberra. We've got different things happening in different states.
I'm wondering, just to carry on the conversation of political strategy, is the ideological imagination and this word called justice. We talk about justice a lot and we protest for it, and I wanted to see if we could go down the panel and if you could share with us from your own position, from where you've come from, what justice looks like on our terms. What does it mean? What does it feel like? Like, what do you imagine justice to be, given it's something that's long been denied us? Susan, do you want to?
Justice is it's hard to define because it's a struggle. It's another day in the colony. Every day is you've got some kind of struggle, some kind of fight. And like I said to you today, Chelsea, you know, our children come through an education system where they spend a lot of time, and you know, schools, you know, the history, it's not taught. You know, I just feel like, yeah, it's with the institution, you know, everything's in, you know, it's just I'm frustrated. I don't see any justice. I'm a bit like Aunty Anne says. You know, like, yeah, where you don't get a voice. You don't get, you know, you get kids to aspire to do things, and if you speak out, or you're seen as a radical, you know, a political radical, doors don't open for you. No doors open for me.
That's why we don't have funding from anyone. Let that be known as well.
And you know that you talked about the punishment that's been inflicted on yourself and your own family in the course of demanding justice.
Yeah, and my family, like, yeah, has, but with South Australia by corrections and police, and the judicial system, you know, like we've sadly my mum passed away 5 years after my brother's death, and from suicide. She got worn down. We lost a few family members, so that there's an ongoing effect of, like Aunty Shirley said, of intergenerational trauma. You know, it's non-Aboriginal people, they can't walk in our shoes, but then you know, Parliament isn't a body of our peers. They are not a body of our peers, but they make laws for us. And when we go to court, they judge us. They're not a body of our peers. Like, when is that ever going to be, you know, brought up? You know, we're on such unequal footing that I don't see any justice, and that's sad. And I have to skill my grandchildren up, who are teenagers now, to record. Like, I have to skill them up to record when they come into contact with police, and that's the kind of skills I have to give them, and that's really sad. Yeah. That's really sad. And you know, my teenage grandkids, they're only just finding out, and with a lot of the, you know, the agenda that's been going on about, they're finding out what's happened in their family, the historical stuff, and you know, and they're becoming active now as teenagers, and they will call stuff out. And that's how I want them to be. So justice is that you have to skill your own families up and your communities, and you've got an obligation. Like, we have obligations as Aboriginal people to our communities. That's you know, we have to, and that's justice to me, is that we have to organise our own justice.
Thank you. Justice as resistance. Shirley?
Yeah, justice means to me, in particular with the deaths in custody, that it would be good if the perpetrators of those crimes could be punished. That's what I would like to see. And also in relation to our people, like, I find that health, housing, education, other things, These are the basic fundamental rights of any human being, but why should they come at the expense of the loss of our language, culture and law? That shouldn't be. And I guess in relation to children like my son, I call them this country's hidden shame because like Aboriginal people, they can't vote. So they have no voice. So as David's mum, it's my job to get his voice heard and others like him, and I'll do that till the day that I die. But so this country does have a hidden shame, and I worry that if someone from that particular group becomes part of the justice system, like if one of the guys were to attack another human being, they could get charged or an AVO could be taken out, but they wouldn't even be able to comprehend that. But there's only one law. It doesn't take into account their disabilities or whatever, and that law is for the white man, not for the black man or for a profoundly disabled child like my son. Yeah. That one.
Yeah. So just quickly and briefly.
Justice.
The fundamental key to justice, to freedom, to an egalitarian existence, ethereal utopia is going to be met with resistance. We are always going to be pressing against adversity in terms of where we want to be, where we see ourselves. As I stated before, our beautiful loved ones are alive in the words we speak. We must continue their ceremony. We must continue their songs, their stories, their everything, or, you know, it just falls on deaf ears, and we can't allow that to happen. Empower our households, empower our young people, reacclimation with spirit, with country, the ability to sit around that old wunderman, that fire, and reconnect. Dididing under. Talk to our spirit. Them old people are here, right behind us. I was lying in hospital last year. I didn't think I'd survive. And all the old people went down in theatre 5 times. The 5th time I went down, all the old people come. All the old people come. And it was quite profound. And in that moment after I come to, and I started coming together, this was 2 weeks before we lost Aunty Sherry, mind you, I found strength in knowing that the old people are alive in the words we speak, because they were all there as I'm talking to you fellows here and people online and stuff. So reacclimation of spirit, reconnection, empower ourselves, identity. Who are we as urbanised blackfellas? How do we coexist within this system that continues to disenfranchise us to where we want to be as a people that are united? Are we united as a black nation? These are the questions and conversations that we have to have. So yeah, freedom is a beautiful narrative, and it sounds lovely, but by golly, we've got a lot of hard work to do. A lot of hard work to do and a lot of hurdles to overcome, so that the children that are yet to be born have got a chance at, participating in world creation, to purchase land that was stolen from their ancestors, My grandfather went to 2 world wars in 1914. He come back and he died a non-citizen. Little things like that. Understanding and, for the broader community to empathise and consider that, hey, these are disenfranchised people. But how do we convey that to the broader audience is the question, and is a fundamental key. So, just carry our spirit strong, empower our households, empower our people, just to, sit around that old fire and connect. Not around the bonfire where it's too hot. Hold that spear and not the beer more.
Justice to me is about awareness, support, reaching the young fellas before they have a chance to go off the rails, finding, giving them a safe space to be able to do creative art or writing. Most times, young fellas don't paint because they can't afford paintbrushes and canvases. So about supplying some creative stuff to get them creative, like we always have been. Justice can start with just us. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
It's a strange thing, justice. I've never seen it, never felt it. Don't know the dimensions of it. It's a very much like a spiritual being. I know very well they're there. I know I get kicked up the mum sometimes when I do things wrong. So I know that justice is there somewhere too. We haven't sighted it, we haven't seen it, but we know it's there. And it has just as strong a force as those spirits that kick you up the behind when you're doing the wrong thing. And it's something that's motivated generations of our people within our own country, this striving for justice, for its own sake, really, not for, well, the true fighters strive for it for its own sake, not for some sort of financial reward that's tied up in a compromised justice situation. So we've had justice compromised for a very long time by our people. And the sad thing for me is that our own people have become, in my father's words, our own worst enemy. We have to fight to decide amongst ourselves who the correct spokespeople are, who are speaking truth all the time, not just parroting it because they've heard someone else say it or it's a popular consensus now, but who have walked a particular line all of their lives, not some of their lives, because that's what eldership is at the end of the day. You're judged by the content of your lifetime experience rather than one good here and maybe a murder over here that's covered up. You know, that's not justice. And we still have yet to see it in this country, justice. Justice for me is employing our mob to build a fleet. Send them back.
Justice for me is everything that justice should be that it isn't. Equity, fairness, and also truth. Also, I'll start believing that there is such thing as justice when people start being held accountable for these things that they're doing to our mob. And I'd also start believing in justice when there's equal, opportunities to education where it all stems from, and also when government bodies stop investigating government bodies. And also, I don't believe in justice when I see such things as homeless people going to jail to serve a 4-month sentence for stealing food, so their hunger is served and so they can survive. Not these people that are killing our people off and getting away with it for years and years and years. That's not justice. That's my beliefs in justice. Thank you.
If you're a visitor at Canberra at all and you go down and see the Tent Embassy, just have a look at some of the writings on the demountables. They are good at plagiarising our good ideas, the government. The acknowledgement this year in Aboriginal Week, etc., always was, always will be, is actually written on a demountable, and it was one of the sayings that my sister popularised in the 90s and the early thousands before we lost her. Always was, always will be. It was a longer saying before then. But, they plagiarise our good ideas and we're never, ever given credit for where those ideas come from. And that's part of the invisible justice here all the time. We'll get someone like Ms Burney or Mr Hodgson jump up and say, that was my idea.
And the other thing too, I just want to share with you, from our family perspective, our family, and I'm talking about us co's from Kyah, we're rather proud and staunch, don't like to take a backward step, certainly challenged, irrespective of who you are in the pecking order within our family, because you talk about our elders, our spiritual guiders, our ancestors, they certainly walk with us every day. But I just wanted to share with you, a couple of years ago, he wasn't a death in custody, but he was certainly in and out of custody. He was hounded all his life as a young man because he is our blood. And I don't know if people remember, but he was up home in Kyah and he got out of jail. He had to report to the Gunyans. They used to strip search him down the street. They never gave him any peace. There was a funeral on in Kyah this day. And the police, we call police Gunyons, right? They went after him in town. He came out of the house. They shot him in the back. Our young nephew shot him in the back. And as he laid there in the gutter, they handcuffed him. That's right. And no one, there was a husband and a wife police officers that were on duty at the same time. They haven't been charged. That's right. And he is crippled for the rest of his life because of who he is. You know, it is so, as I said, it's sad. We're sitting here and we're waiting for the mighty word that starts with J. You know? But as sure as we are sitting in this room, and there's no doubt people that are here that have got good intent and that have had and I've got to say, it's not easy for you, but let me say this to you. It is even fucking harder for us.
Just in regard to justice, you know, Gamilaraay woman, colonisation. We haven't seen justice in this country. 1838, when they hung them 7 white men, there was a 12th man. His name was John Fleming. They aided and abetted him through this St John's Wilberforce Church. They have a plaque of him. Until we get justice, until I start seeing coppers in this country being charged for the murders that they've done, then we can have some justice. Until they are charged for the crimes and they are incarcerated for them crimes as well. We need our land back. That was part of the recommendations as well. Sovereignty and land rights. We need to create economical businesses. We need more housing. We need to bring our people out of the cities and back to country. And we need our houses and we need our lands back to do that.
Look at what's happened since the Royal Commission recommendations came out. We got the National Native Title. We got their version of our justice for native title, which is no justice at all. You know, there was a deal done under the table. I don't know, it was somewhere near under the table by 2 particular politicians, where we got the 10%, 90% deal. 10% would get their native title recognised, 90% would get it extinguishment. That came to pass. That's what happened after the Royal Commission, Ricky Dick, dealing with one of the first issues that was brought up by Ricky Dick, native title. Took it off us, compromised our rights straight away, compromised our law, compromised our system straight away. By going into the white system, every day we compromise our law, and that's what we have to remember at the end of this process. Their education is even a compromise of our law and our system.
If anyone else here wants to speak to justice.
We've got about
8 minutes.
Seth, you got any questions? Any questions online, Aunty?
Online, I don't think we have more questions.
So I got one question. Where to from here, people? What are we going to do?
Yeah, we've got that exact question.
Embassy again. I mean, it was always set out as a place for us to come together and discuss our politics and how to advance up the hill. And all they did was move the house further up the hill. I'm talking, you know, we don't need black political parties. We need our law recognised, and by that I mean a black parliament. Paint old Parliament House black. Take up our positions as black parliamentarians, as black native title land owners, and then we start to dispense our law on our land. And there's power in that, and justice.
Yeah, a national call to action in Brisbane in September. We are converging on Canberra as the families and all other supporters, grassroots community activists, and the goodwill of all white fellows and other people in between. Come to Canberra. We need to have a discussion. We want to sit with the Prime Minister to discuss, these issues that continue to paralyse and leave us in social leprosy. But September, we a call to action with all states and territories, black fellows and deadly white fellows out there. Come, and yeah, we need to create a big corroboree, a big dance, a big ceremony, and moving forward. Because if we're not united, then we're not going to get anywhere. So please, I implore you all to come up there. And let's do this. We only got one chance at this friggin' dance.
Please let everybody know about this action when it's coming. Yeah. And look, the children of Pastor Don Brady, they can lead me anywhere, all right?
Thank you.
Oh, next year, sorry. Yeah. Next year at the Embassy, we will celebrate the 50 years of its existence, and I think there will be some very, very high-stakes political agendas being worked through then. And I'd like to ask people to support the Embassy now in the build-up to the 50th. There's certain issues, like I said, paint our Parliament House black and let's call it our Parliament. I don't want to go into a system where our law is immediately recognised as a lesser law than the white system. We're equal, and if you really want to examine it, our law is better than theirs. But that's beside the point. I mean, the Embassy, the lead up to the 50th anniversary, where have we come to in 50 years with the racist government? The future's in our hands. Let's see what we can do to make the changes we need.
What time next year will that be?
Invasion Day. I mean, the week before, we were doing a program for the last few years where we had the 25th of January was the last day of freedom, 26th was Invasion Day, 27th was the first day of resistance. I mean, I'd like to stick to that program in some sort of format. I'd like to talk to the Feds at some stage about taking that beat of a man, George, and his horse down and put the 4 founders of the Embassy up on that plinth. There's a roll that we've done from 72 that I'd like to see their names written into the concrete down there somewhere. There's a lot of things that we need to start doing to get that place, set up so that they can never come along and with a stroke of a pen and say it's no longer your land. We need to solidify the ground there as the Embassy, a permanent, protest site. Historically important, all the things that we have spoken about the Embassy for the 50 years of its existence. And I should also like to add that there are particular people that have manned the Embassy over the years. I think Isabel is one that comes to mind for me that was really, she did it to the point where she was in a wheelchair and, no longer able to physically look after herself, but she was still down there front and centre all the time. Every time there was a political issue, I'd like to see that sort of commitment from everybody. We will see justice if we get that sort of commitment from all of our people.
I just want to thank everyone for joining us, both online and in the audience. And I guess in finishing on the matter of justice, Cornel West once said, justice is what love looks like in public. I don't have any sense of hope that there's justice in any settler institution that's predicated upon our non-existence. But what justice looks like to me is the people that are sitting here that are fighting every day. And it comes from a place of love for our people. And so I just want to, on behalf of all of us, to say thank you to each of you for giving so generously, so lovingly to our mob. Thank you.
So just on behalf of FISTT, War, Brisbane and G&G, I'd like to thank all of our panel members for coming down and having a yarn and talking through such a near and dear conversation, to all First Nation people throughout Australia. I'd like to thank Dr Chelsea Watego for coming down as well, making time to have these talks, and also to our counterparts at UTS, Alison, as well as our sound and video live stream guys up the back for doing it.
And for all the amazing work you've done, girl. Let's go raise some balls, okay?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Bring a young one with you. Mentor somebody. Everybody that's a teacher. And if you're black, you're a teacher, all right?
Thank you.